the Public Theater's presentation of Richard Nelson's Illyria, which is a wonderful play. I can't say enough nice things about it. I love the structure that it takes, which is almost structureless.
Yes.
It's written and directed by this playwright and director Richard Nelson, who's kind of a sort of an auteur of theater at this point, a very specific style of doing theater. So talk to me about that style.
Well, you can keep saying nice things about. I'll take as many nice compliments, and I need those. So
well, actually,
that's the reason I do this. By the way,
the play goes till December 10th, and there are free tickets every day.
Yeah, you can always get a free ticket. You just show up to the theater at 7 o'clock or earlier, and you'll get a free ticket, which is a kind of a tribute to Joe Papp and what he did, bringing theater to everybody in the city and treating it like almost like the public library in a way. But what Richard is doing, and he's been kind of testing this new form of theater out for a while now, for a few years with some other plays called the Apple Plays and the Gabriels, all were at the Public. And he continues it with Illyria. He describes it as verisimilitude, and I would classify his style as theater of verisimilitude. He's going for an honest portrayal of life on stage, not necessarily a naturalistic style of acting or behavior, but a truthful representation of relationships, of listening to each other, of like you said, it's not necessarily a lot happens, but a lot lives in between the lines, and the subtlety of it.
There's an allowance of the mundanity of the relationship.
Exactly.
And you kind of, one of the most rewarding aspects of the show is parsing you end up sort of gradually learning what is important and what are the things you sort of should be latching on to about these characters. Right. But that is a gradual process, and it requires a fair amount of sort of rewarding work in the first scene. It's a play of 3 scenes, and the first scene itself has got to be like, what, 45 minutes long?
I think that's, I think that is a majority of the play, the first scene.
40, yeah.
I think it's, at least half the play is that first scene. And then you have two scenes that follow it where things become a little more clear. But it is a challenge for the audience. It's not a play where you come and you just sit back and, everything's handed to you and you just sit there and smile and laugh and walk out having this lovely time at the theater. It really forces the audience to become an active member and to lean in and listen to what's happening and find the relationships and discover what's really going on behind the words and behind the scenes. Because most of the heavy action, most of the big blow-ups happen off stage. We deal with House of Un-American Activities Committee, which Joe Papp was called in front of, but that happens off stage. We deal with Robert Moses and Joe Papp's fight with Robert Moses, but that happens off stage.
And you deal with greater conversations about capitalism in the show as well,
right?
And what that sort of meant for the city. But even within that, that's kind of on stage, but it's the way normal people would talk about it.
So it's like if you were, if you were called to trial or something, and after that you went home and had dinner with your family and talked about it with your family. That's what we're showing you. We're showing you the aftermath and how these friendships function in a way to kind of bring the people back up and build them back up from the pain that they have just gone through. And I think that's what Richard was most interested in. Not necessarily telling an origin story of the Public Theater or glorifying Joe Papp in any way. He was more interested in telling a story about young artists struggling in a difficult time in a difficult city and sticking to their convictions and not letting each other down and continuing to push each other to achieve something great, which they eventually do, because you're sitting in the public watching the show and you know how it ends, but you don't see that in this thing.
And that was something that I was so happy about as well, because I think when you read the description, if you don't know who Richard Nelson is and you read that it's about the founder of the Public, you kind of are expecting to walk in and get like, hey, let's start a theater together.
Yeah, exactly,
and,
right?
That's not what you get.
Not at all.
At all. You get this like very subtle, minimalistic portrait of the artist trying to make it at this specific period of time.
Yeah, and who these guys became is something very different than what we're showing on stage too. I mean, Joe Papp becomes a myth in this city. He becomes a legend in this city, but that Joe Papp is a very, very different person than the one that we're trying to show you. In fact, this is not necessarily even Joe Papp. It's a young artist who is struggling. And I think if you're going into it with expectations to see the Joe Papp of 1980, you're going to be disappointed because it is not that story.
So how does Richard Nelson sort of build this with you guys as a company of actors? Do you essentially get that script that you're performing like that? Because my sort of frame of reference for what it felt like he was doing felt to me like early Mike Leigh plays or Mike Leigh films, which is getting a company of actors together, having an idea, and then fleshing it out with them, and then sort of writing it afterwards.
You nailed it. That's exactly what it was. I've never been a part of, or I've never had a theater experience that has been more collaborative and more of a company than this one has been. I mean, you were saying it before when we were talking backstage about the relationship that you saw on stage with my fellow castmates. You just felt like there was this bond there. And there is because of that. Richard encouraged, he gave us one kind of goal, and it was to be as truthful as possible and anything that felt theatrical to call him on it. We had an open dialogue. Everyone was able to speak their piece, and he collaborated, and we built this thing together.
So what did the play look like when it was, you get the job, you show up, what does he hand you?
So he hands you the script. It's a script, and the script, the structure of the script was exactly the same. 3 scenes, the beginning and the end, where we started and where we end is very, very similar. It was those little, mainly the relationships, like if something just felt off, and as we discovered the characters, if something didn't seem right with the direction we were going or developing it, we talked about it and we changed things. And every night the show changes. If you come tonight and then you come, a week from now, you'll see a different show. There are always different shades. Little lines change, you're informed by your castmates, but all we have on that stage in this show is each other. So whatever your castmate gives you informs the next step you take. So it's extremely exciting. At first it's very scary, but it's also probably the most liberating experience an actor can have on stage.
So you have a script, you have 3 scenes, and then you guys, it's not like you're improvising and trying to come up with the lines after that. Maybe in between the lines you are, or?
Well, no, not but we would change lines. Lines would change. If something didn't feel right, if it seemed false or pushed, things would shift, things would change, little things would change. Nothing major, but little things changed. Scenes got restructured. I think a good example of that was in the 3rd scene, kind of the cathartic moment where Joe and his wife Peggy are on stage talking, and she's sort of, the festival is collapsing. He's going to go be a stage manager. This potentially is the end of free Shakespeare in New York City. And she kind of talks him out of this depression by explaining it was worth it just to do it. Right. Where that lied was actually in a different place initially. So the scene became a little just restructured, and then it ended up where it finally lives, and I think it works a lot better because of that. It just, but things like that.
Well, what's so interesting to me is, normally when you get a written play and you're looking, or any kind of script, a screenplay, a play, the writer sort of has to add in certain dramatic things for readers to sort of pull in. And I'm wondering,
like touchstones of drama, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm wondering, when you get this play, Richard Nelson, you've probably seen his work, a little bit about how he works. So how do you look at how do you read that play? How do you feel it differently? Because, the first 20 minutes of that first scene, you're kind of just getting acquainted with these people, and it's a lot of just mundane conversation until eventually a minor conflict happens between two characters in that scene. But it's a lot of just little, like, who are these people? What do they do here? And there's no immediate conflict, like I think most drama would require.
Well, you know, that's an interesting point, because when you first approach it, when I first came to rehearsal, I just approached it like I'd approach any play, and I was looking for those touchstones of drama. It took Richard to sort of encourage us not to look for those and to strip that away and to strip all those tricks we do as actors normally.
It's like what do you want? What does my character want? And it's like your character in that first scene doesn't necessarily want something until near the end of the scene, and he's realizing that he wants that thing.
It becomes so. He. Another thing Richard says is, you know, it's like jumping. Just jump off the ledge, and you don't know where you're going to land, but you'll land safely. A lot of what we're taught in acting school and things like that is you find an objective. There's a super objective. What do you want? This is what you're after. But what Richard is encouraging is to live in the gray area of life, which I think that's where we all live. We don't necessarily know what we want. We just are. We're just living. And then slowly we'd start to discover, well, maybe this is what I want, but maybe then you think you want that, but you don't want that. And I think that's what we're trying to do. That's that verisimilitude that I was talking about. It's not knowing exactly where you're going. It's letting the relationships and all that stuff start to inform you. And then it just takes you in whatever direction you end up in.
Yeah, I always get hung up on that. I used to always get hung up on that in drama school. People were like, "What does your character want in this scene?" And you'd be like, and you'd be the writer, and you'd be like, "Well, I feel like you get what they want by the end of the scene, but why should I state that in the beginning?" That's so boring.
I mean, here we go. We're talking about acting school, but I always found it so. It really bothered me when you're sitting there and you're like analyzing scripts and stuff. And I get it's like a good exercise for a young actor to do, but like you're like every line you're like to get this, like no one is thinking that quickly about, well, now, like when I'm talking to you right now, I'm not like, I'm saying this because I want this. I'm saying this now because I want that. I think it just leads an actor down a bad path.
If you go into a scene thinking about what each line
you're on your head.
You're not in the moment.
You're not in the moment. You're not listening. You're like, okay, now I'm going to say a line like this. And now I'm going to, you're not living. You're not having a real conversation. You're not talking. It becomes... it becomes like gymnastics. Yeah. It's not acting.
It's very one-sided as well.
It's totally one-sided. Yeah, it's very strange.
What was the most difficult part about doing this play for you? What was the biggest challenge?
I think just trusting Richard's vision, trusting that you can. You know, we talk very softly in the show, and a lot of people have trouble with that. We talk. You know, we're right here. I talk to you like I'm talking to you now. We have a mic, but if someone's sitting up there, they wouldn't be able to hear what we're saying. But that's what we're encouraged to do in this play. Now, we do have mics in the theater, and people can get listening devices, which I encourage everyone, old or young, to get the listening device.
I didn't, but I was okay. I was fairly close. Okay. Yeah, but I was okay.
I just say get it. You can take it on and off. Yeah. It just will make your life easier in case you do have trouble. But trusting Richard to go down that path of just being truthful and not pushing and not knowing where you're going, that was very scary at first. And I remember the first week of previews, everyone in our cast was just a nervous wreck. Like none of us had done this before, this kind of theater, so we were all very scared. My castmate, Will Brill, who was a dear friend of mine, we worked together many years ago, and we've been reunited on this, was sweating like buckets. I think he sweat like 3 gallons of sweat that first preview because he was so, we were all nervous, but we made it through it. And like I said, once you take that leap, it is the most liberating, form of acting, I think there is.
We should talk about, and you kind of said this, that maybe the feeling came from the fact that you guys work so closely together in rehearsals that when I was watching the play, I could not get over just how perfect everybody felt in the play. Perfectly cast, well performed. I just kept thinking to myself, like, what an amazing ensemble.
But I think you think that because we're just kind of who we are. Yeah. Everyone's just sort of who they are, no one's really acting with the capital A. It's just us, and because we went on this journey together, and we have such just, we got lucky. We have a really good group of people. You could always have an asshole who screws the whole thing up. I guess I'm probably I'm saying this, so I'm probably the asshole.
You don't know who the asshole is.
Yeah, if you don't know, it's you, so
Yeah.
it's me. But, well, I'll take that on. But other people are great. I'll be the asshole. But no, we just have a good group, and we trust each other.
You can't have a bad group doing something like that.
I mean,
though,
I don't think it would work.
Yeah.
I think Richard got really lucky with the cast, because if you had a group that wasn't meshing, it would be a disaster.
Yeah, you can't get like a big ego in there to play
Yeah. It can't be about, it has to be about everyone. It truly is an ensemble or a company. It's not, it's not like one star and they just run rampant on the stage and everyone else has to get out of their way. We're all in it together. Yeah.
Now you, I feel like you're the kind of actor who knows good directors and cares about good work just simply based off of some of the movies that you've been in.
I think I've just been lucky.
You think so? I mean,
Yeah.
Todd Haynes, Adam McKay, Wes Craven, kind of. Yeah.
He's a very sweet guy. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and if I was an actor, like
it was a great start.
I
it was a great
I would
start.
have jumped to work with Wes Craven,
yeah.
no matter what movie it was.
Yeah.
But what was it like working with Todd Haynes on Carol? That's a great film.
I've been surprised, actually, how some of these great directors, like you just mentioned 3 of them, but there are a few more that I've worked with too that are
like who?
Well, David Chase, Craig Gillespie. I mean, like, you could keep going. But, like, what I've noticed is that a lot of these great directors, especially Todd, who's a visionary, who, has changed cinema in a lot of ways, and continues to produce great films, he's just a good guy, and he's super passionate. I think you get this impression that these great directors are, untouchable, and they live in this ether, and they're just like mysterious artists. And maybe there are a few like that, but I've been lucky enough to work with the ones who are just good people, and super collaborative, love to share their knowledge, and love to encourage their actors. And that's probably another common thing they all have. They all love their actors. They really do, and they really encourage you. They never put you down, and they push you to be a better actor. So,
what was it like doing something like The Big Short, where apparently Adam McKay was not just sort of encouraging, but like really collaborating on set and improvising?
I think it was similar to this experience with Illyria. A film is a little different because you don't have all the time, you don't have all the rehearsal and all that stuff. So, but each day, was a constant collaboration, and again on that we had a great cast too, and we all trusted each other. But McKay's notorious for just changing a line, throwing out a joke here and there, letting you change it. He was, and I think that's why it was successful. That could have been a super dull movie, Big Short, if it was just this sterile financial drama. I think, Plan B and Dee Dee and Jeremy and Brad over there made a very wise decision to bring Adam onto that. And I don't think it would have worked otherwise. Yeah.
Is that daunting for you when you go into a situation like that, like The Big Short or even like Illyria, and it's going to be a completely different kind of exercise as an actor?
That's the joy of it. That's the best part of doing this, is that you get to do, it's not the same. You're not clocking in and doing the exact same thing every day. You get to try different things. You get to dabble in different styles, work with different artists. That's what it's all about. Yeah.
You don't ever it never gets to your head or anything?
I always get, like the first day of shooting or the first day of rehearsal, the first preview, I always am a nervous wreck. I'm just, a ball of anxiety, and I'm going to get fired, and everyone hates me, and why am I doing this? I should be an accountant. And then it all goes away. You get there and you get in your groove, and And if you get out of your head, then it becomes a lot of fun.
How does Illyria feel different on a daily basis than, I mean, I know we've talked a lot about how it's a different kind of play and everything, but once, it's sort of set in stone like most plays, and you have a script that you're going to do, but how does it still feel different doing it every night versus another more stagey play that you've done every night?
Well, so I did Front Page last year uptown. And that's a very structured play. I would say that play was almost like a song. Like you hit your notes. You had to hit your notes because it was like it was a machine. It had to keep going, and there was no room for air. So you had to hit the note and you had to keep it going. This one is a little different because we're not on a clock. There's not a time. We never get that. This is. We're coming in at an hour 45, we're coming in an hour 50, you got to cut 5 minutes off. No one's ever saying that to us. And it changes every night just because the relationships, if one night I do something a little different, then Kristen, who plays my wife Peggy in it, will do something a little different, and then that, it snowballs into a different type of show. But I think that's the biggest way it changes every night. But there is room for kind of improvisation or riffing or, more like jazz experience, if you want to call it that.
How long was the rehearsal process up until the point where you've gotten previews?
It was a normal rehearsal process. So we did 4 weeks, 5 weeks, something
Fairly
like that.
standard, but you're still building the show over the course of that rehearsal.
Yeah, but luckily this is, it's not that long of a show. It's 3 scenes, and as you saw, the blocking isn't that complicated. Most of the time we're sitting around a table. So because of that,
it also feels like you could change the blocking a little bit in a scene if you felt necessary.
Well, that's one thing that actually is a little difficult for us. We can't really change it that much because we have those mics, right. And there's a soundscape. We have a mixer who's trying to catch words so it can pump them through the system. So that we are a little, you've got to sort of stick to your blocking. But yeah, I mean, it does change. It constantly is changing. Little things like that. But also, I mean, like I was saying, because of the limited amount of blocking and that it's 3 scenes, it gave us a lot of time to just sort of dig in and collaborate,
Let's get some questions from the audience. Who has a question?
Hi.
Oh, hey.
Hi.
So you mentioned your impressive resume a couple of times. So I was wondering, though,
I mentioned it. Don't put that on.
Oh, man. I just sound like a blowhard.
But I was wondering if you've ever thought of maybe creating your own play or own movie, and what would it be about?
Oh, God. I have.
It's your idea now.
Yeah, here we go. I have, and then I sit and start to type, and then I'm like, I'm an idiot. I shouldn't be doing this. Leave it to the professionals. Maybe one day I'll become more courageous and actually pursue that. But right now, I leave that in more capable hands. Yeah.
Next question.
Hi. I was wondering what draws you to like a part. Is it the character? Is it like the plot? Is it the director?
I think it could be all or one of those things. I mean, it's constantly changing. Sometimes it's the character, sometimes it's the whole thing, sometimes it's just the director and you're a little apprehensive about the project. As long as there's something there to spark an interest, then it's an instinctual thing, but if there's something that sparks something in your gut that makes you want to be a part of it, I think that's worth, pursuing. Yeah.
I think I have time for one more. Hi.
Hi. Are there any directors that you want to work with in the future?
Yeah, there's a lot of directors. I mean, Scorsese is obviously the big one.
You a New York kid too?
I grew up actually in Cleveland.
Oh, okay.
I'm a Cleveland kid. But yeah, Scorsese I'd love to work with before he retires. And then there's a ton of young directors out there that I'd love to work with, and but also I'd love to be a part of something. You mentioned Cassavetes backstage, right?
Yeah. Cassavetes, Mike Lee.
And Mike Lee. But the idea of a company, like doing a film as part of a company, like a young group of collaborators, that is something that in cinema has always intrigued me. I'd love to like be a part of something like that at the ground level.
It's like the hardest thing.
So hard
I imagine it to
nowadays.
be like the hardest, not just nowadays, but the hardest thing in the world. Because even when we've had periods of time where you could see filmmakers kind of trying to, not necessarily recreate that, but it's just like like Mike Lee is just, you know, he's a genius, and no one has ever been able to do it like that. Ken Loach does it a little bit, but that's similar time, and I mean, no one's ever going to be able to do anything like
tough.
Cassavetes.
And it's something you can't, you know, like saying that is one thing, but then as soon as you try and create it, it's just a disaster. It doesn't work, because I think it has to just come organically and naturally. Otherwise, it's not going to happen.
And then also, as soon as you get the actual economics of filmmaking on your back, doing something like that is even, we don't have this scene, but we just got to go, guys.
Yeah, yeah.
Make something up.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
you get actors going, dude, I don't know, man.
Wait.
Dude, what?
And then they walk off or whatever, you know. It's like, I'm not going to do this. Yeah, yeah.
John, congratulations. I love the play
Thanks
so
for
much.
coming.
It is at the public till the
Yeah.
10th.
Remember, free tickets. You can always get a free ticket. So please show up. You will, you know, that's what Joe Papp wanted. Free theater for everybody. So
It's thrilling.
you're young and strapped for cash. Come see us.
And you might see me. I'm going to go see it again. John Magaro, everybody. Give him a
All
round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you.